help me welcome to the stage Carre Otis.
Hello. Putting together this TED Talk has been excruciating in many ways, and I'm so grateful to be here sharing with you a little bit about my story. I'm sure my nerves will ease as I begin. Love for me was not something that was modeled in my childhood growing up. Love for me was not something that I understood. It's not that I didn't have two parents that loved me. They did to the best of their ability. But I was not specifically told that loving myself was as important, if not more important, than loving someone else. And I think many of us could agree that our kids aren't taught about this self-love. They're not necessarily taught that they are divine, important, sacred beings. I grew up in San Francisco. I was born in 1968 into a home that was unhappy. There was a lot of dysfunction in my household, a lot of sorrow. There were more questions than answers. And there weren't a lot of solutions to the problems in our lives. Everyone did the best that they could, but it was hard. School for me was equally as challenging. I was diagnosed dyslexic, but not before I was called stupid, slow, idiotic, and clearly I learned differently. I was different than most kids. And I was out of the box. Eventually, I actually ran away, and I dropped out of school, and I found myself at 16 in Berkeley, on the streets, wondering what on earth I was going to do with my life. And it was an evening at a nightclub. A woman approached me, and she said, "You know, you're beautiful. I would love for you to walk in my fashion show." Nobody at that point had told me I was beautiful, and I certainly didn't relate to myself in this way as beautiful. My self-esteem was really low. However, after I realized she was serious, her name was Veronique, and we negotiated a price for that evening. It was $20, which was more than I'd seen in a long time. I agreed, and it was on an evening, a late afternoon in October. It had just started to rain, and I bicycled to the address she'd given me, only to find that it was a very seedy bar in Berkeley, and that the actual runway was a bunch of tables that were put together, and that the actual clothes that I was going to wear were various pieces of lingerie, which was a detail she'd neglected to tell me at the time. Two things were birthed in that moment. And the first one was this idea that I might be able to make money off my looks. Now, I didn't have a backup plan like most teenagers. I didn't have a plan. I didn't really know what I was going to do. The other thing that was birthed was this performer in me. At 16, I knew, and being the Carrie that I am and was, I knew I couldn't walk down that runway. My self-esteem was so low, I was actually underdeveloped. I was super shy. But the performer in me could. And it was about a month after that I found a real agent. And things happened really quickly. I was flown to New York, where of course I was told that my looks were far too European. And then I was flown to Paris, to Italy on their dime, and I was told that my looks were far too American to be able to make it in that market. I got on a plane and landed in Paris, knowing that I needed a break. In Paris, which is a beautiful, beautiful city, I was told that I needed to stay in my new agent's apartment. And I arrived by car at this apartment, which was this gorgeous, gorgeous place with mahogany doors and one of those old elevators you go up. And what was to happen there was not so beautiful. Within the first night, I woke up with my agent on top of me, and I would have to endure these visitations for the months to come. My voice was so suppressed at that point that I couldn't speak up. And I lasted almost a year until finally I said something. And the predictable happened. I was sent home. But this was actually this amazing divine intervention, because where I ended up was on a farm in Northern California. And it wasn't an ordinary farm. It was a farm that was full of midwives, herbalists, spiritual practitioners. The women that I met there were powerhouses. They were women who were opinionated. They were strong. Their bodies were for growing babies. And their breasts were for nursing them. And they took me under their wing and gave me an opportunity to view a type of woman that I had not yet known. And it was this sort of divine, sacred sense of woman. And it helped restore in me something so powerful and so profound. At this time also, Buddhism crossed my path. And Buddhism gave to me this dialogue, this ability to answer the questions of so much that I had been wondering. I wanted to know about suffering. I wanted to know about death and rebirth. And it also gave me a practical application for my very monkey mind. That was meditation. This is a hard talk for me to share, harder than I thought. Thank you. Thank you. I actually thought that I could go back out into the world, into the modeling industry, and do it my way. A lot had happened by that age, but I was still really naive. And I did enter that industry, and I found an agent, and that stability that I'd found allowed me to have a tremendous amount of success right away. But a big part of me burned out, and I called my agent and I said, I need to take a week off. I'm exhausted. Please hold any calls, have them wait for me. But Hollywood and modeling, they're not patient industries. And I received a phone call halfway through saying that we had the biggest break we were going to have, and that we were up for a job. It was a movie. Sorry about the slides, called Wild Orchid. I left retreat, and it was one of those moments I look back where I think, had I made a different decision, how different would my life be today? But I didn't make that decision. I took this movie, and I auditioned, I got it, and I stepped into something I'd never known. I was exploited. I was abused. I was used on that movie set. And actually, there were stills lifted that were sold to Playboy magazine against my wishes. Sorry, I'm having trouble with the slides. And it was from this place where my self-esteem was so crushed that I accepted a proposal of marriage against my better judgment, knowing my voice was so sort of lost at that point, knowing that it was probably a really bad idea. And then I was shot. And I wish I could say that wasn't how it went. And that's actually all I want to say about that part of my life, because why I'm here is to tell you about this part of my life and how I got from there to here. I think there is an intuitive part of us that wants to heal, a fire in us as humans that cannot be extinguished. And I know for me that certainly is the case, and was then. Secretly, I began to go to therapy, where I could get my head around this PTSD that I'd been suffering from. The PTSD was from the sexual attacks in Paris. It was from the movie Wild Orchid. It was from being in an abusive marriage. And it was from a gunshot wound. I also realized how utterly disconnected I was from my body and my sexuality. I began to put the pieces of myself back together like a puzzle. And I began to reclaim my voice. I began to understand that my sexuality was so wrapped up in my identity of myself, and that it was going to take a lot of work for me to develop a relationship with myself again. It was during that time that I was willing to stand naked and in therapy and working on myself that I began to realize I was my best friend. I was my best date. I was the provider for everything I had once thought only someone or something else outside of me could provide me with. It was from this place that I began to realize I wanted to be in relationship. I might want to share that with another person. And I also realized at that point I would never compromise myself again. I would never compromise my voice, my integrity. I would never again fake having an orgasm. I could actually go out and be in relationship because I had my back covered. I believe that we really manifest where we're at, that it takes us developing a relationship with ourselves and providing for ourselves and creating safety and love for ourselves to be able to bring that to ourselves in relationship. And it was in this place that I realized I could do that. I could make that happen. And of course, as miracles happen, I met a partner who wasn't scared of my power or my voice. There was nothing I was going to have to sacrifice in that union. He was courageous enough to be with me in my vulnerability. And he was courageous enough to reveal to me his. And it was in this place, in this union, that yes, I was given gifts. One of them was this like earth-shattering, mind-boggling, toe-curling orgasm, finally. The other gifts were even more magical, because before I'd met Matthew, I'd been told I could not have babies. I hadn't had a period in 5 years. Within the first month of our union, I had a cycle, and within 1 year, I gave birth to my first daughter. I am now a mother of 2 magical girls and wife to an amazing, amazing partner. But it took me doing this work and coming from where I am today to create that in my life. So if I could wish one thing for each and every one of you, it would be to realize, to have the courage to know the importance and the value of actually having a love affair with yourself, your own self. That once we find this place within us, from that place we can invite people in. From that place, we can be love, teach love, have love, share love. But it starts with us. I want to leave you with a quote from one of my teachers. You can search through the entire universe for someone who is more deserving of your love and affection than you are yourself, and that person is not to be found anywhere. You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserves your love and affection. Thank you.